It's amazing to me how much has happened in the last 6 months. We went from that to this. A cleared lot that is almost ready for the beginning of our rebuild. But before we move forward, let's go back to before the fire. We bought our house in 2003. The housing market was a little bit crazy, and people were going well over the asking price for homes, a true seller's market. We had made multiple offers on homes over the course of a few months, and we were always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Always finishing second, always being outbid at the last moment. We must have seen 40 to 50 houses and had probably made 10 offers. And to top it off, my wife Chris was pregnant with her first child, Claire. Chris gave birth to Claire and was in the hospital for a few days recovering. A real estate agent called me to tell me about a new home she had found for us. I told her that now wasn't really a good time since we were at the hospital. Chris overheard this conversation and demanded that I go to see it. It was in Altadena. I had lived in Pasadena in the outlying area for probably 10 years, and I'd heard of Altadena but didn't really know where it was. Turns out it was only 5 minutes away. Well, I saw the house and instantly knew we had to have it. I rushed back to the hospital to tell Chris the good news. And a few days later, we went to see the house together, and Chris fell in love with the house too. Well, we made an offer on the house, got into a bidding war, and went way over the asking price. But we were determined to not be second this time. Money talks. We got the house. And from there, the Cook family truly began. Over 21 years between multiple kitchen redesigns, bathroom remodels, adding a pool, an office in the garage, a fire pit, multiple paint jobs, not to mention adding our second child, Cooper, 5 years later. There wasn't 1 square inch of that house we hadn't thought about or knew extensively. The only thing left was getting a dog, and the arrival of Charlie Boy closed the loop on Casa de Cook. We had everything we could have ever wanted, and more. So we've had a little bit over 6 months now to process and reflect on what happened to us in the house. But at the end of the day, it's just bad things happen to good people, really. It's not any more complicated than that. And, I thought the house would fall to an earthquake way before a wildfire of all things. But this stuff happens, and it happens every day somewhere in the world. We're not special. It was our time. And I want to be clear about something. As far as tragedies go, we were pretty lucky. No one from my family died. None of my friends passed away. And I know that people did perish in this fire, and that's awful. But just personally speaking, it could have been so much worse, right? So, I think there are levels to tragedy, and I'll let others make that distinction. But, as traumatic as it just wasn't the worst thing that could have possibly happened to us. And there's someone who's always got it worse, which doesn't lessen what happened to us, but it's definitely contextual. Version 1.0 of our house had a pretty good run. It was almost 100 years old, and, it had multiple owners. It had multiple families who got to enjoy it. And now we get to be the caretakers of the transition to 2.0. Now, I say this only because I'm trying to see the silver lining, but it was a 100-year-old house, and it had 100-year-old problems, right? I had a to-do list of things with the house that I no longer have to do. We had a leaky roof in one of the bedrooms, and no more roof. So it's not the way I would have planned it out, but it's not the worst thing that happened either. Don't get me wrong. If option A was keeping the house and option B was going through what we've gone through, I would have picked option A. But since we've been sort of forced into this, it's kind of exciting. We're getting a custom house, new technology, new pipes, new electrical, actual insulation in the house. It's going to be pretty cool. As a kid, probably through high school, my dream was to become an architect. And once I realized that math was involved, that dream died a horrible death. Numbers. Seriously. But now I've been sort of forced into realizing my childhood dream. That can't be bad, right? So Chris and I have taken on the role of co-architect. We're gonna save a lot of money by doing that. But also, you know, I'm a professional designer. Chris should have been a professional designer. Putting our design skills together, coupled with the fact that we knew this house better than anyone else. And also, I'll admit, I've always had a DIY sort of aesthetic. You know, I'm naively believing that we can actually do this. Obviously, we're not drawing up plans. That would be a disaster. But I think, you know, I think we were the best people for the job, and we are definitely the cheapest. So one of the first things we did was hire a structural engineer. And I mean, like, one of the first things. It was literally 2 or 3 days after the fire. And he was tasked with creating the blueprints, the drawings of the house, the measurements that the county would then use to give us our permit and for our contractor to use as his guide. So, of course, LA County, I'm looking at you, county had no record of any blueprints from our house. So between myself, Chris, and the engineer, we basically had to reconstruct the house from memory. Early on, Chris realized that this just wasn't her jam. So she went off and started doing some other things, which I'll get to in a second. But the engineer and I, we had to basically just start from scratch and literally try to reconstruct the house. Luckily, Chris had measured the bathrooms a couple years ago, and the measurements were in her phone still. And so that we knew we had like a hard measurement of a certain section of the house. And so we just were able to extrapolate from there. So if the bathroom was 8 feet wide, well, then that means the bedroom had to be about here. So the engineer would send me an email with a PDF of his drawing, and then I would send it back to him with, you know, red pen marks saying, no, move this wall 6 inches sometimes, you know, or that doesn't look right. That window wasn't there. And so we just carefully just sort of brought it all back together to hopefully the house that we lost. Now, my goal is to walk into the house when it's built and say, this is it. This is exactly how I remembered the house 1.0. Now, you know it, I know it, it's not been the same. But it's gonna be pretty close. I'm actually feeling pretty confident. I mean, we spent a lot of time going over the minutia, and I think we got it pretty close. Now, the one thing that's gonna maybe throw it off just a little bit is we were talked into by our engineer of going a foot higher for the ceilings. So that's sort of like an outlier. Like, you think, oh, just add a foot. That could change the feeling of the house. It's not really gonna change the look. So that's the only, believe it or not, that's the only thing I'm really worried about, is walking in and just going, ceilings are too high. But I don't think that's gonna be the case. I think this is something that's gonna be different, but better. So we are building what's called like for like, and I'm not gonna go into the details of that right here, but basically we're building the same home. It's basically the same floor plan, same layout. But over the last 100 years, thankfully, codes have changed and evolved, because of earthquakes and whatnot. But we had a hallway that was no more than 3 feet wide. It was probably closer to 2.5. It was very narrow. People 100 years ago must have been tiny. So the new code is 4 feet wide. Well, that extra foot and a half, has to come from somewhere. So does it come out of the bedrooms? Does it come out of the living room? Does it come out of a little bit of both? That was my job, basically, to go with the engineer over and over and over until we just got it down to where I was 99% sure that wall was there. And again, we're not gonna know until we get back into the house, but I'm feeling pretty confident. Okay. I was gonna talk about the permit process, the actual permit process, but it just makes me angry to think about it. Have to go through that again. Um, the only thing I'll say is, if you've heard stories about building a house in LA County and going through the permitting process, all the stories you've heard are true. It was incompetence glorified. The people in the permit office, gosh, I hate to speak ill of the stupid, but the things that they would sort of supposedly sign off on, and we thought we were moving forward, then they would come back with other changes that could have been easily taken care of the week or two before when we made the other change. It was like there were multiple people looking at this and none of them were talking to each other. I think that's the very definition of a bureaucracy, of red tape, whatever you want to call it. It was frustrating. And I'm feeling myself getting angry right here, right now, and I don't want to go there. We were I believe, the 35th permit that was approved. There are 6,000 homes that are going to have to be rebuilt at some point. I don't know how they're going to get through this without changing what they're doing, but it was bad. The process was just so mind-numbingly stupid sometimes as far as what they were trying to get us to do. Mind you, they didn't have a record, an actual record of the square footage of our house, and yet they were fighting us on the square footage of the house. Even after our engineer had gone out and measured it, I think they were trying to get their measurements off of Google Earth. I mean, I was naive enough to believe that the county, specifically the permit office, would be sympathetic to our plight. Nah. Ha! They could have cared less.
Pro tip.
If your engineer upcharges you a little bit and says, I'll take care of the permitting process, do it. It's the best $2,000 that we've ever spent, because I didn't realize how much. I just was thinking it was like paperwork. And at first I was like, $2,000 to submit something to the county, I can do that. But the amount of negotiating that had to go along with the permit process, my engineer basically, told us what was happening as it was going along. But even he said, he's like, I'm not even going to bother telling you about all the conversations I had with them, because it'll drive you crazy. And I think he was regretting not charging us more. But anyways, if you can get it for around $2,000-$3,000 and get your engineer or someone else to do that, I highly recommend it if you've never done it before. And as I mentioned before, at the same time that I was dealing with the engineer, Chris was then working on procuring all of the materials that we would need to build. And I'm talking flooring, windows, tile for the bathrooms, for the floor, for the wall, for the showers, buying the hardware for that, buying the hardware for the kitchen design, paving stones in the courtyard, and a million other things. When you're remodeling something and there's 4 walls up, well, then you can bring in tile and you can sort of put it on the ground and you can look at it and you say, okay, this is how the light reflects on the tile. You dip-a-dip-a-doo. You can't do that when there's no walls. She was on top of all of that, and she just knocked that one out of the park. That is not my forte, and that's what makes us a good team. And if I had to do it, we would still be doing it. Let's just put it that way. But we were told early on that one of the things that you don't want to do when you're dealing with a contractor is to stop their progress. So if you're waiting, if all of a sudden the contractor's ready to put in the windows and your windows aren't there, and it's like at minimum a month wait, they're going to go off and do work on another project. They're just not going to sit around for a month and wait for you to get whatever you need to get. So you have to be on top of all that stuff. I mean, the oven that we have already purchased, it's going to take 6 months to arrive, right? So it's August now. We ordered it in, I think, July. It's not showing up until the end of December. So it's those kind of things that can really derail a project if you're not on top of things. This is incredibly hard to do, designing in a vacuum like that. And Chris really nailed it. She was on top of it. The amount of work that Chris had to do and to be organized and to be able to source things, I mean, she's an all-star. she really nailed it. And if there's a delay or if there's a problem, it's not because of us. That's for darn sure. And this is probably not a great analogy, but if you can go through something like this and you haven't murdered your partner in their sleep, that's a good team. I mean, there's a lot of negotiating that has to go on with this, right? Because I have a view of what I want the house to look like. Chris has a view on her end as well. And I think you just have to have, if you have that love between the two of you and you respect each other, then you can say, I'm not seeing it, but if you are feeling that passionate about it, then let's go with that. And there was a lot of give and take on both sides. And, you know, through this tragedy, if you will, the one thing I realized, and I knew it before, but it just sort of solidified in my head. Chris and I, we make a great team. And that's what gives me confidence going forward with this project, because she's got my back, I've got her back, and just hope our contractor has our back. Speaking of, we thought we had a contractor lined up. They came back with their estimate. It was a little pricey. And when I mean pricey, I mean like ridiculous. So we have now pivoted. We are now talking to other contractors, and we have found that with our having a permit, it's like a marketable commodity, because lots of people have contacted these contractors and said, I want you to build our house, but they don't have a permit. So we can sort of use that as leverage, if you will, and that because any contractor who's dealing with us right now, they know that as soon as we sign on the bottom line, they can get to work. And if it's taking someone else 6 months to get their permit, heck, they could be almost done with our house in the same time. So it was a little bit of a slap in the face to have to start over with the contractor, but I think ultimately we're going to be in a much better spot, and obviously a much cheaper option. I hope. Okay, we are on our way. The permits have been approved. It's been a difficult phase, but if this is the worst it gets, we're doing pretty good. So give me a hammer, give me a paintbrush. I am ready to do this. Let's go. I can't wait to see what this house is going to look like.